Yeah. One get bigger. Erev Tov, everyone. Chodesh Tov. Rosh Chodesh this evening. I mean, Shavuot is just a few days away. So we've spoken before in this context about the concept of Tumimot. It tells us regarding Sfirat Omer, Sheva Shabbatot Tumimot Tiyena. There are a number of different ramifications that come from that word. We've spoken before about what Tumimot means in terms of the counting of each day, whether the counting has to be if one misses a day, etc., when on each day one has to count. Poskim, of course, to discuss the idea of Tumimot relating to the final day of the count, which is Shavuot, which is really the only day of Sfirat Omer that we count by not counting. Right? We count the first 49 days. The Torah says, so we count, so we get to the 50th day, we stop counting, so to speak, on the 49th day. We don't say Hayom Yom Chamishim LaOmer, but that is the 50th day after we've counted the seven complete weeks, right? Sheva Shabbatot Tamimot, meaning complete. Then we get to the 50th. That's when we get to Shavuot, and therefore we have a halacha which there's been much discussion about. There's always much discussion about it, and it's surprising actually that it comes up only quite late. We don't find this halacha anywhere in Chazal. We don't find it in the Gemara. We barely find mention of it. Don't really find mention in the Rishonim either. But it really comes up in the Achronim, the Taz, Magen Avraham, a number of the poskim, and they say because it says Sheva Shabbatot Tamimot Tiyena, that when it comes to the night of Shavuot, we have to wait until it is certainly nightfall, and only then can we begin. Only then can we begin what? So there are those who say, the Taz writes, and the Mishnah Berurah brings it, that in terms of davening, we have to wait until nightfall before we can begin Maariv. Magen Avraham and others say, no, we have to wait until nightfall for Kiddush. So according to that, you could daven earlier, then you could wait to the Tamimot by Kiddush. There are those who learn other ways as well, but that essentially is the idea. And like I say, it's surprising because it only comes up in much later generations. The earlier the Rishonim, Chazal, maybe they'd heard of it, but they never told us about it. They didn't say. So it's interesting that we have this halacha of Tumimot, meaning that we have to wait until nightfall for Shavuot. Again, over here, it's not so bad because you wait till nightfall, so 8:10 or whatever it is, still reasonable. You can still have your, you can have Maariv, you can go home, you can have your meal, you can have your learning, and there's enough time to do everything. It's not too bad. In other places where, a little bit further north, where it only gets, you can only start davening at 10:30, and by the time you finished eating, by the time you started Tikkun Leil, you've already finished Tikkun Leil. Somebody sent me today in some of the shuls in London, I think they're davening Shachar at 2:43 or something like that. So, but they only start at 10:30 and they're finished at 2:30 in the morning. So that's it. Where's your Shavuot gone? So the question is raised, how necessary is it? How stringent do we have to be about only beginning this Tumimot? Do we only have to start later on? The truth is, there is another source. Interesting, the Netziv brings this halacha as well, but he learns it from a completely different place. The Netziv writes, not from the concept of Tumimot. He also says you have to wait until nightfall to begin on Shavuot, but he learns it from the Pasuk, a different Pasuk. The Pasuk says regarding Shavuot is Ukratem be'etzem hayom hazeh mikra kodesh yelachem komlech tavda lo ta'asu hukat olam b'chol mashvotechem ladorotechem. The fact that it says be'etzem hayom hazeh, the very special and somewhat unique expression, we find it a number of places in Chumash, but it's obviously not arbitrary and it's not just there by coincidence. So the Netziv learns, so there are those who learn from Sheva Shabbatot Tamimot, the Netziv learns from Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, but Etzem Hayom Hazeh, that it has to be at nightfall, only then can we begin Shavuot. Now, another reason why all this is surprising is because really this contradicts with another halakha, which we are very familiar with, which comes up in terms of Shabbat and Yom Tov. Certainly in the summer months, we're all acquainted with the idea of early Shabbat. But even when you don't do early Shabbat, even when you do Shabbat Bismano, whatever it is, we have a concept of Tosefet Shabbat. Tosefet Shabbat and Tosefet Yom Tov, which is Losif Mechol Al HaKodesh, that we bring in Shabbat before nightfall, or before even Safek nightfall. And Subam Rabbanan Shir, we've been discussing exactly the Zmanei Hayom. But so we add on a little bit while it is still day, we add on, even if it's a few minutes. Again, if we're doing early Shabbat, so adding on a much longer time, but you're adding on a few minutes, you're not waiting till nightfall in order to begin Shabbat or Chag or whatever it is. And here we seem to be saying that because of this idea of Tmimot, this is the difficulty. It's a challenge, because we have a halakha already on the way back from the Gemara, which is that we have an idea of Tosefet. The Gemara says, for example, the Gemara in Brachot talks about how Rava Metzle Shel Shabbat Be'erev Shabbat. That's relating to early Shabbat. But we have this idea of Tosefet Shabbat or Tosefet Yom Tov. On the other hand, we have a much later custom minhag halacha, which was established about the idea of Tmimot, but that seems to overrule the concept of Tosefet Shabbat or Tosefet Yom Tov in this case. It's not Shabbat. So why is? So there's actually an indication in one of the Rishonim that maybe on Shavuot itself there should be a Tosefet, that we don't have to wait for Tmimot, and that is an inference that one could make from the Rosh. The Rosh writes, the Gram Psachim tells us that relating to when one has to stop eating or when one is having a meal on Erev Yom Tov. So the Gemara talks about Pesach, and it uses the expression of that as Ad Shetechshach, meaning until it gets dark. So a number of the Rishonim, Tosfot and the Rosh and others ask the question, why does it say Ad Shetechshach, and why does it not say what it says in other places, which is Mina Mincha U'Lemala, meaning that later on in the day, not from the time it gets dark. So they explain that on Pesach we have a specific halacha when we're eating matzah or making kiddush, that it has to be, we have to wait until nightfall. But that does not apply in other Yamim Tovim. So says the Korban Netanel, who's later one of the Mefarshim on the Rosh, he says, there you see, he says Shach related to Pesach. But that's not the case. Again, that's the first night of Pesach, not the seventh night of Pesach. We had a discussion earlier this year. But he says that would not be the case relating to other Yamim Tovim. And included amongst them, other Yamim Tovim, would be Shavuot. So says the Korban Netanel, on Shavuot, you don't have to wait to daven Maariv until it gets dark. You don't have to wait for Tmimot. He says the Magen Avraham and the Taz, he goes against them. He says you can start davening early. So what's behind this machloket? On the one hand, we have those who say Shavuot, we have to wait until nightfall before we begin Maariv, or at least before we begin Kiddush, because we have to fulfill the idea of Tmimot. There are others who say no. Dafka on Shavuot, you shouldn't wait until nightfall before you start Maariv. You should do it earlier. What's behind the machloket? What are they arguing about? So maybe they're arguing about the nature. We said the reason you would want to start earlier, aside from the fact that you want to start earlier because you don't want to wait till too late, but the reason you would want to start earlier to fulfill the mitzvah of Tosefet Yom Tov. So there's a question, and we have discussed it before briefly, but what is the nature of Tosefet Shabbat or Tosefet Yom Tov? When I say that we can add on, we can begin Shabbat early, or we can begin Yom Tov early when it's still daytime, the language the Gemara uses is that Rav would daven of Shabbat on Erev Shabbat. So it was still Erev Shabbat, but he was davening Shabbat. So what is it? Is it Erev Shabbat or is it Shabbat? How do we look at it? So conceptually, there are two ways to view it. One way is to say, when we say Tosefet Shabbat, Tosefet Yom Tov, when we add on, we extend Yom Tov, we are quite literally extending Yom Tov. Meaning it does not, the night begins, you look outside, you think it's still light, you think it's still day, but you've started davening earlier, and therefore it's now night. That's already Yom Tov for all intents and purposes. We're extending it completely. That's one possible way to view it. There's another way to view it, which is to say, no, Yom Tov begins at nightfall. That's when Yom Tov begins. I can't bring that forward. I have a mitzvah of Tosefet Shabbat, so for certain aspects, i.e. in terms of the Yisur Malacha, in terms of what I have to daven, that will start earlier, but let's not kid ourselves, right? The Yom Tov itself is only going to start later. And all the time we see this interplay, we see the tension between these two points of view. It comes up a number of different mitzvot. For example, I think we've mentioned before, let's say Brit Milah, right? Brit Milah, if a baby is born in the time that is after the Tosefet Shabbat, for us, for the parents, they've accepted Shabbat already, so we view it as Shabbat, but really it's still daytime, so it's still Friday. So when would the Brit Milah be? If we said that we're actually extending the day and bringing it forward earlier, so then the baby's born on Shabbat, the Brit will be on Shabbat. On the other hand, if you say no, we say Tosefet Shabbat, meaning for us, in terms of our restriction, in terms of our halachic observance, it has to begin now. We can't do Malacha, whatever, but it's still Friday. right? Then the brit will be on Friday. That's when the baby was born. We assume the baby was born on Friday, and then the brit would still take place there. So we see that it's not complete. But how does this relate? Maybe this is the machloket regarding Tmimot. I've seen this. There is such a suggestion among some of the Achronim who say like this: if we would say that what's the idea behind Tmimot? What are we saying? We're saying that you have to complete the counting the 7 weeks, and it's only when that 49th day has ended, you have to wait until the 50th day begins before you essentially start counting. Again, as we said, we don't count in Shavuot, so we have in Maariv, we say Kiddush, etc. So if we say that by doing a Tosefet, we are bringing forward the beginning of the 50th day, okay, it's the beginning of the 50th day. It's Sheva Shabbatot Tmimot. Those 49 days have completed. Okay, they were completed in a few hours less than or in a few minutes less than what you normally would have thought of. It doesn't matter, but it's Tmimot because the day is finished, the new day has begun. So too, there are those who want to explain the Korban Netanel. On the other hand, if I say that when I have Tosefet Shabbat, when I bring it forward, I'm not bringing the next day forward. I'm just placing on myself restrictions of Malacha. I'm changing the davening I have to do, etc. So then you would say, so we haven't yet reached the stage of Tmimot. You're still in part of the 49th day, and now you're starting to celebrate Shavuot, but you haven't yet gotten to the 50th day. Therefore, you have to wait. You have to wait until later, and only then can you begin. And that would be the idea of Tmimot. That is an interesting. It's a nice explanation. It's not without its difficulty. It's not without its problems, because the Taz himself seems to contradict this in a number of halachot, where based on what we've just said, it would seem that the Taz is saying that it does not yet begin the next day when you accept the Tosefet Shabbat. In a number of halachot, he seems to imply that in fact the next day does begin, and there's discussion exactly what the difference is between the cases. But there's a nice explanation I saw from Moadim Uzmanim, and he says the following thing. He says, why at the end of the day, the Taz says specifically over here, we have to wait for Tmimot? Because you could have actually argued something else. You could have argued that even if the Tosefet does not extend, does not bring the day forward, so then Mima Nafshach. Meaning, if when I say Tosefet, I say I'm bringing the end of the 49th day earlier, so I've counted the 49 days. If I say it makes no difference, okay, so I made Kiddush earlier, I daven earlier, but it's still going to be Shavuot at the end of 49 days, right? What is it then? So he says like this. He says Shavuot is unique amongst all the Chagim in that Shavuot doesn't have a date. Nowadays it does. Nowadays we have Vav Sivan, but the calendar could be changed. It could be Hey, it could be Vav, it could be Zayin, it could be on any of those days. How is Shavuot, the date of Shavuot, defined by the Torah? It's defined by the fact that you count 50 days from Chag HaPesach, from Macharat Shabbat. You count those 50 days. Once you've counted those 50 days, only then you get there, then you have reached the Yom Tov of Shavuot. So if I, over here, on any other Yom Tov, let's say like this, if I have a Tosefet Yom Tov, and I bring it in earlier, essentially I'm saying, rather than waiting for that date to begin, I'm bringing that date forward. Here, there is no date to bring forward. Here, the Itzumor Shal Yom is, you've counted 50 days. So if you've not yet counted 50 days, you've not yet counted 49 days completely, you can't bring it forward. There's nothing to bring forward because it hasn't come yet. That's maybe the explanation. That's what the Taz means when he says that it has to be Tumimo. Bottom line is, at the end of the day, this is I think it's fair to say, a relatively well-accepted halacha. Certainly in Eretz Yisrael, many shuls will wait, and people will wait to fulfill Tumimot, that we won't start Maariv until nightfall. Like I say, in other places, further north, etc., where it's very, very difficult, where it gets very, very late. So if there are reasons and there are extenuating circumstances, one has to know for themselves what an extenuating circumstance would be. Certainly, if it means it's so late that people are going to fall asleep and people are not going to have, there's not going to be any learning, they're not going to have a Seudat Yom Tov because it's too late when it starts 11 o'clock. So people say, no, we'll eat supper before so that we won't be hungry, and then we'll go to shul, and then we'll come home and we'll just have Kiddush and just have a small bite. That's not correct, because part of Simchat Yom Tov is that you have your Seudat. So that could be an extenuating factor. And based on those, it'd be there is what to talk about in terms of relying on the opinion that only Kiddush needs to be after nightfall, or that it doesn't need to be at all. Those are the different opinions expressed. But as I say, ideally, if one can, and this is the common practice, to wait for the Tmimot, as we do here, we wait until nightfall, and then we begin, and then there's certainly no shayla in terms of that it's the count has been completed. Rabbi Hanania ben Akasha Omer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zakot Yisrael, v'chach b'alem tov mitzvot, shnei ma'abrech b'kman tzidko, yagdil Torah v'yagdil.